Okay. Great. My name is Marcy Mowry. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation. And with me today is Mike Piaskowski. He is the director of the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps, who would be the beneficiary of the work that you would be doing. So we'd like to just open up the floor to any questions that you might have about the request for proposal that you received. And either Mike or I will answer it to the best of our knowledge and ability.
I could start.
Sure.
I'm going to be asking about the budget because it's that's pretty much how we plan everything here. I do have a question about the 40 grand portion. And we want to just really get a clear idea of like what the expectations are because this is for 2 years, right? In terms of what deliverables, in our mind, we were wondering like, are you looking for this to also cover paid media, or are we just talking about implementation when it comes to just the creative, just the materials, just the collateral, not a media buy?
I would say that we believe it should be inclusive of what is being proposed. The 25,000 was really earmarked for the development of what that program promotion would look like. And then if it's recommending a billboard, that budget would include the billboard, some paid advertising. It might include the templates, etc. We can't say exactly because we don't know what all the tools would be in that toolbox for building the awareness. Mike, do you
Okay.
want to add anything?
No, I agree with that.
And I know that it says, the plan is to not exceed 25 grand and then implementation not to exceed 40 grand. But say the plan was, and ended up being less than that, can that portion of that roll over into implementation?
Absolutely. Our total budget that we have for the 2 years is the $65,000.
Okay, so then
So,
there's that wiggle room that we can move
yep,
around.
yep.
Excellent.
We'd rather see more implementing it than developing a plan and not having any funds to implement. That would be key for us.
Okay. All right. Yeah, those are the two top questions that as of now just came to mind as we're thinking about this.
Okay. And I do want to point out that we stated it in the proposal, but the current logo for the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps will stay in place. Basically, this is helping to elevate that logo and the knowledge base of what the public knows about the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps.
Mhm.
Other questions?
Hi, I'll kind of chime in on the same line as Carlos. As far as the 40,000 for implementation and paid media, are you looking for specific quotes on this a while from vendors, or are you just looking for general areas of where we would put how much the bucket for billboard would be, how much the bucket for radio would be, that sort of thing?
My hope is that it would be a real number.
Okay.
We wouldn't want to get down the road and say, okay, we're going to do this, and then realize that the billboard was going to cost us $50,000 and we only have $40,000 and we're not doing anything else.
Okay. That's all kind of questions I had.
Okay.
I think I just
Allie?
want to yes, thank you. I think I just want to piggyback off of that and make sure that I understand correctly that you are looking for your marketing partner to complete the media buying for this RFP. Is that correct?
I would hope, and Mike, help me out here at any point. I would hope that the partner would identify the locations and would work with us to implement it. Because one of the things that we have built into there is we would want to have 6, 12, 18, and 24-month check-ins. The outdoor core, they're very busy when it comes, I mean, they're running the program in the summer. They're not necessarily, that's not what they're doing, is working with Lamar Advertising to put up a billboard. So it would be our hope that there would be some involvement and support.
Perfect. Thanks for
Yep.
clarifying. I do have some other questions that I could go ahead and ask if nobody else has anything on that same topic.
Go for it.
Great. Okay. On page 5, under methodology, you mentioned your outreach strategy. Is that something that like you could currently point us to that exists on your current like digital space, your digital presence, or is there any kind of documentation that we can have with the details of this existing outreach strategy?
I'm going to look at Mike for that to see what they have in place.
We don't have anything written down for our existing strategy. We are doing this plan to help us kind of codify our approach. We're happy to, I don't know, I guess this is the space to talk about what we're doing, but basically we run seasonal right now with our needs. So when it is the late fall, winter time, we place social media posts to try to reach people to apply to the program. And then throughout the summertime, we use social media to, and some press releases to elevate program events, and to try to attract news outlets to cover some special visits. But other than that, those are the main ways that we're reaching the public at this point, other than word of mouth. So yeah, this effort is to help us figure out a plan and document something that we could use.
Okay, understood. And then under that same section on page 5 of the RFP, you mentioned about your target audience and how they can be best reached is through like the analysis of your PAOC strategic plan and workforce analysis study. So is that something that already exists and that we'll have access to?
Yes, you'll have access to all of the studies that PPFF has worked with us to complete over the past several years. And those include all the ones that you've just mentioned. The first phase of this, Marcy, I'll let you speak to how we're sharing out the information from the first phase of this particular project. Is phase 2 of a 2-phase kind of effort for outreach. But our strategic plan and our program assessment will certainly be shared, or can certainly be shared with you.
And I will say that I'm going to put it in into the chat box as soon as my computer agrees to work with me. Some of you may have received a link to the page that contained the studies that were referenced. And there was a little bit of problems with that because we were having some background problems in general. But the studies are there. The one that Mike just recently referenced, the one that we just completed, the executive summary is there, but it is enough to help you to understand what the workforce analysis identified.
Was that linked in the RFP document?
It was not in the RFP document, and I am trying to find the page, and it is not jumping over for me here. So I'm going to ask Pam to email it to me. So we'll have that before we finish. We'll put it in the chat box.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I do have another question regarding the in-person training. Could you clarify what your expectations are for the in-person marketing and outreach training? And is that different for that first part was mentioned on page 5, but then on page 8, it mentions the brand ambassador training. Are these two different types of trainings, or are they the same thing, kind of just mentioned two different times in two different ways?
I would say they're the same thing, mentioned two different times in two different ways. Part of what came out of the workforce analysis is that, TikTok would be a great way to reach people. The state isn't permitted to use TikTok, but the participants in the outdoor core, they are the generation that is using TikTok. So part of what we want to do, and a lot of them want to be an influencer. So as a workshop for them, as well as to build that presence of them talking about their experience, we want to be able to train them on how to be a brand ambassador using social media, why they're part of the outdoor core and beyond. And I saw.
Yes, those are the plans that we're referring to.
Yes, so thank you. Because my page was not getting there. So if Carlos put the PA Outdoor Core page on the PPFF website, so you'll see the workforce assessment trends executive summary. You'll see the program assessment report from 2023, and you'll see the strategic plan from 2024. They're all in there on that page.
Perfect.
You can
Yeah,
click through to them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for all your thoughtful questions.
Yeah, I do have, I think, two more here from our team.
Okay.
And those were under page 5 on deliverables. Could you clarify the expectations for the electronic executive summary PDF? There was some confusion about, I think, just the wording on that and what exactly it was you were looking for.
I think what we're looking for is something that we can share out internally. So for those who don't want to read the entire marketing plan, it would be a summary that we can present internally to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, to our funding partner that is making this money available. That's kind of summarizing what the plan is without going into all the detail.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. That helps clarify. And then one last question from me rather. On page 8, you mentioned delivering certain brand products that build on the current PAOC brand. Is there a certain suite of like brand products that you're specifically looking for, or are you looking for your marketing partner to guide the strategy and direction of those items and essentially tell you what we believe is best?
That's the route we were taking.
Perfect. Okay. That's what I gathered from earlier, but just wanted to make sure. But I believe that's it from my team.
Thank you. Well, see, the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps is a really remarkable program, and youth are finding out about it, but we're really trying to build, think of making it become a household name. So when somebody talks about the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps, they have a receptor in their brain to say, hey, I know what that is. That's a really cool program. We would love to see the General Assembly support it. We would love to figure out how our community can partner so that we can bring the youth here. And maybe it helps to expand the program. So it really is elevating the program and taking it to the next level.
I have one question, building off of that. What does a successful partnership look like at the end of the 2 years? Any qualitative or quantitative goals outside of what you just mentioned here? So becoming a household name, brand recognition. Are there any other that are top of mind?
The one thing that I've been thinking of is making it a household name to build, for lack of a better word, a coalition of support so that the program can survive for years to come and we can keep this thing going. Particularly in our current times that we find ourselves in, funding is becoming more and more scarce, and we need people to recognize the value of this program so that they are willing to become invested in it, perhaps even for funding purposes, if that answers your question at all.
It does, thank you.
I think it would be important for the plan to allow us to assess as we're moving along, which is part of those check-ins. If we're doing a strategy and there is no return on that investment, how do we pivot? Or if there's a negative reaction to it. I have mixed feelings on billboards. They capture attention, but for those of us in the conservation community, it's like, oh, viewscapes are adversely impacted, so there's two sides to it. So how do we ensure that what we're doing isn't just an act of putting money into marketing, but not getting anything back on that investment?
I think too, we need to build a legacy at the same time. We have a long history of youth involved in conservation in Pennsylvania and across the country. And the programs that have come before us, I'm specifically thinking of the Civilian Conservation Corps, they have a legacy that goes along with them. And we're at a point in time right now where our program has been in the field for 10 years. We have about 1,500 people through the program so far. We're at a point in time, one point of only a few points in time, where we've been able to make major investments in the physical plant here in our state park and state forest system, but also major investments in youth in the conservation workforce. So building a legacy, I think, is part of this in my mind too. So again, along with kind of the household name type of thing, building a platform to help us celebrate this program, not just now, but for years to come, I think it's important to me.
Yeah.
You mentioned Civilian Conservation Corps. Are there any others that come to mind that you're like, they're rocking it when it comes to their marketing, their brand recognition? Are there any others that you can think of as examples that you look to that you're like, okay, we could pull from, some things from what they're doing potentially?
The Civilian Conservation Corps was a program that ended in 1941. It was a works progress administration improvement program during the Great Depression. So, the Corps is modeled after that. It was bringing people in to work for the greater good of all people and give them a living wage. So I don't know, Mike, from a current day program, who's rocking it?
Well, I don't have good examples, but because I am kind of pigeonholed, I guess, and I should lift my head out of the sand a little bit more and look around the community. But there are organizations that you may want to research. One of them, there's a national organization. It's an association called the Corps Network. They have a website that perhaps you can glean some materials from. There are conservation corps operating across the country by our partner, the Student Conservation Association, our currently contracted field partner for implementation. There is also a group called Conservation Legacy, and there's a group that also comes to mind, the American Conservation Experience. They have been fielding these types of youth corps programs across the country for many years, and perhaps through looking at their websites, you would be able to find some materials that might offer some inspiration or direction or context.
And I would think that all are facing a little bit of a similar project, as we're bombarded with information all day long. How do you break through that noise? How do you stand out? And I think that was part of the reason we were thinking that some of the youth could be involved. For me, Mike, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that part of this is, how do we empower the Corps after the 2 years is over to continue any type of brand awareness independently, so part of the reason to train a trainer is so that they can then replicate some of the work internally. We were fortunate. Right now, we have private foundation money for marketing of the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps. That's not always the case. So how do we do things that allow the brand to be built and to be recognized even after the 2 years when it may be back to more of a even tighter shoestring budget?
For the budget that you have, how do you come at those numbers?
Those numbers based on when we were putting together the grant proposal, talking to some folks, colleagues on my board, calling some other folks saying, hey, what would this ballpark, you're in marketing, what do you expect this to cost? And so we had conversations with them to get those numbers.
Okay.
And we actually, I think it was a little higher, but then, you get what you get when you get a grant, They gave us an amount to spend and we adjusted everywhere a little bit so that we could try to have the workforce analysis done, which gives us a better understanding of the people that are participating and maybe what some of that messaging could be. And you'll see that in the executive summary. But we also knew that we needed everything that all 3 studies have shown that people don't always know what it is. And I will say it was probably 20 years ago, Mike, there was the Pennsylvania Conservation Corps. And to balance the budget, the General Assembly eliminated the one line item out of there was $250,000 and lost millions of dollars in federal money to keep that program running. And part of that was because people didn't know enough about it to say, hey, this is really important. It's getting projects done. It's creating a ready workforce among our youth. And we don't want to see that happen to this program. We want people to understand the value that it's bringing to the Commonwealth and to the young people of the Commonwealth.
I know, this is statewide, but the dollars are going to be very difficult to stretch to make this something statewide. So are there any particular geographies or anything within Pennsylvania in which you think that, hey, something like this is going to land well with the market in terms of the audience? Or is that something, I know that that's something that we can help you think through, but I'm not, I don't know like currently, what your experience is in terms of like what areas in Pennsylvania your messaging works best, if you've had traction when it came to, your outreach.
Yes, it's difficult to answer without digging into it, I think, and talking with a professional such as yourselves to help us figure that out. That said, what comes to mind when you ask that question for me is perhaps it's not so much a geography, but perhaps it's a demographic. And I think the demographic that and this might not be totally true, but people that we're trying to reach right now are non-traditional conservation people. So in my mind, we already have allies. This isn't to disparage any certain group or anything, but we have already like allies with scouting groups. They're already involved in the outdoors. They've kind of drank the Kool-Aid of how awesome the outdoors are. And other conservation partners are already feeding us excellent people. We need to now engage non-traditional conservation partners in this work to bring new people into the fold. What that means, I don't know. What it looks like, I don't know. But I think it's less of a geography, like Philadelphia or Chambersburg, and more of a strategy to focus again on those non-traditional partners. How do we begin to bring new people into the fold? That might be counterintuitive to, or maybe not, building a base. I don't know. Do we stoke our existing base or do we try to go after new folks? I think we could use some help trying to understand that, but that's my answer for that one. I'm off the top of my head.
I think what you're saying, Mike, is we often preach to the choir.
We do.
How do we,
yes.
how do we reach beyond the choir?
Yes. Thank you.
We know that it's not a ton of money, but I think that there's enough funding there to move us in a good direction. And if you look at the studies, you'll see that the outdoor core work is really compelling. And the stories that these youth have to share is also very compelling. So I think it's an exciting opportunity to help lift a program up and not just engage the young people, but, you know, let other people know what's available out there.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be about how we can do it this in a very, very smart way. Because I mean, you know, you mentioned billboards, but you know, 40 grand for billboards are not definitely, you don't want to do that. I mean, that's it. Some of those billboards are like just for 3 months. You know, like, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be taking portions of your budget. So you know, but there's definitely different ways that, you know, any of the teams that are involved here can think through, you know, how we can approach this in a very smart way, so that there's something that works for y'all, but also that you can take it upon yourselves even after the 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and it might be recommending some potential partnerships.
I think so. I think, you know, that's definitely something in our heads, you know, like, you know, whenever we're thinking about any types of campaigns, especially for something where you're requiring, you know, kind of like behavior change, for, you know, people who don't think often of you, or you're not even at top of mind, and to, you know, move that needle over to the other side. You know, yeah, you have marketing, you could do something, but then you need that other aspect of, you know, working with other organizations or people that can also help you get there.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, this program takes a community, and building a community around it is really, really what it's all about.
So I mean, I don't think we have any questions. I think other people asked very good questions that filled all my bucket. So I feel pretty good, I think, at this point.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
That's it for question for me. Thank you.
Well, and you know, feel free to take a look at the link that Carlos put in the chat box that I was having trouble finding. Because like I said, the other studies are there, and there is a lot of information from those other studies, which kind of informs why we felt that this was the next step in the journey. Okay. Well, we appreciate you being here. And you should have my email. If a question comes up, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll put it in the chat box as well. And as a reminder, the contract will be with the foundation, not with the state. It would be with the Pennsylvania Parks and Forests Foundation. Okay, well, great. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
You're
Yep, enjoy your
welcome.
day.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you
too.
so
Take
much.
care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hold on, don't speak yet. My little recording button didn't come on, so I don't know if it recorded or not. It says it's recording.
Okay, well, if it says it is, it must be.
Let me put my glasses on, Mike.
Maybe you can